Hi, this is Dan,
And this is Walter.
and welcome to Flights of Fancy.
You haven't even had the beer yet, and you're
I know,
already.
right? I'm drooling over it. It looks so good.
You know what? It's good.
Where we're going to do a flight of different beers, and after each beer, we're going to discuss a book. And today's book is Walter.
Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Did
Right
you
in
really
time
just-
for Halloween.
Did you really just sip your flight?
I did.
Oh, jeez. All right, just in time for Halloween. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and let's start off with our flight. Our flight is what?
It's a English pale mild ale from Wallenpaupack Brewing Company up there in the thriving metropolis of Hawley, Pennsylvania, in the northeast, the upper reaches of the Poconos. I was there yesterday. It's a relatively new brewery, 2017. And what I liked about this is that it won a silver medal at the 2020 Great American Beer Festival.
You're a liar. The reason you like this is because it's got a big Union Jack across the can.
And I'm also
that's
a big
what caught
fan.
your eye.
It did, especially since we're doing Mary Shelley, and she's of course British.
Ah, there we go. A little theme.
Yeah, it's a theme. And I didn't want to start off with anything too heavy, and this was, it's only 3.5%.
3.5%. That's water, basically.
It's water. It's a session ale, so it's eminently crushable. But I like it is malt forward on that one.
Malt forward, yes, and you do taste the malt as soon as you put it in your mouth. It smells good too. It's got nice OT, like an oat backwash to it.
Yeah,
but it goes down very smooth.
Yeah, I like this.
3.6. You could probably drink 100 of them and drive home. You'd be fine.
You probably could. And this was there was last of the 4-packs, so I picked this up, and so this is pretty good, really good.
All right. Well, there we go. That's our flight. Let's get ready for our
You want me?
yeah, top me off, and we'll
Top
get
you
ready
off
for our fancy.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Let me tap you. So, in this first round of flights, what are we talking about? This first part.
We're going to talk about the backstory and some of the misconceptions of this novel. So let's start with the backstory. I'll go first. Let's just shoot some facts off against each other.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this was written famously by Mary Shelley, but she wasn't even Mary Shelley then. She wasn't even married yet. Yeah, she was Wollstonecraft. What's the last name?
I have the book right here.
Godwin.
Yeah, because William Godwin, the famous philosopher, writer, anarchist,
was her father, and her feminist mother.
Yeah. She wrote the Vindication of the Rights of Women.
Right. So she was 18 at the time when she wrote this. Famously on a retreat with some of your favorites.
Yes, Byron, Shelley, on the shores of Lake Leman, Lake Geneva, the Villa Diodati. I was actually, when I was an undergraduate touring around Europe, I was on the lake. I have photos of the Villa Diodati. It's a private residence. You can't go in it. I tried. But it was just beautiful. And Shelley and Byron didn't even know each other. And they were both shy, but they got along really, really well. There's a lot of drama here because Byron also really liked Mary Shelley's cousin, Mary Claremont, and she would eventually have a baby with Byron. And then also, Shelley was also having an affair and when he got married with her as well. So there's a lot of drama in with this romantic coterie.
And in the middle of all that drama, they decide one evening that they are going to have a contest of ghost stories. There is some, in one of the lectures I listened to on Frankenstein, I think it was from the Royal College, they were talking about how there was another man there.
Polidori.
Yes, and he was being paid by Byron's publishers to keep careful track of what Byron's doing and report back to them.
Right, I think it was Byron's doctor. It was Byron's doctor, but he was also kind of like, hey, he was exiled.
Kind of like a manservant type secretary / doctor. And he would provide through letters back to the publishers what a full account was going on, and in that account are some of the ghost stories, at least their titles. Right. So we'll have to do another podcast on those one day.
Right. Well, I just in Leslie Marchand's Byron: A Portrait, which let me see, I read in 1992. So we're going back a ways. During one of the evening sessions at Diodati, after discussion of ghosts and the supernatural and the nature of the principle of life, Byron suggested they all write ghost stories. He himself began one with the settings of the ruins of Ephesus, but then he stopped, and then Polidori later realized and seized on the idea for his anonymous kill called The Vampire. And Mary was the only one to take this seriously to write the Pact of the Supernatural story. And the result, a year later, was Frankenstein.
And what's interesting, I mean, it seems kind of weird to us today, but ghost stories were really, really prevalent back then. I mean, when you talk about Dickens' Christmas Carol is basically a ghost story. And telling ghost stories at Christmas time was a big thing. So getting together and telling ghost stories when you didn't have TV or radio was kind of the thing to do. So that's what happened. So Mary Shelley writes Frankenstein as an 18-year-old girl.
Phew, 18.
18. She writes Frankenstein, and the book has never been out of print since.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's totally amazing. Totally amazing. And not only that, but it was genre breaking, genre defining, had themes in it that were like still important in today's discussion of literature and
we'll
art.
be talking about those themes.
And we will talk about those themes. So it's quite an achievement for an 18-year-old girl.
What genres did it create?
Well, there's a big argument whether or not it created the first science fiction novel.
True.
Because let's be honest, Mary Shelley didn't invent a man bringing life into the world.
No, Jesus and Lazarus.
Lazarus. Even in the Cabal, there's stories of the Golem, which was a clay creature that was brought to life through mysticism, etc. So these types of creatures existed in ghost stories and tales, etc. But what she did is she made it particularly human.
Because it's science. It's not magic. It's not supernatural.
Right.
It's like, I'm going to study, and galvanism was a big thing. Science, electricity. This was just a few years or a couple decades before Ben Franklin with his electricity stuff.
Well, this was actually at a time when people would go into theaters and crowd around these tables where people would do experiments with electricity, where they would shock limbs and watch the monkey's paw open and close type thing. And it became like it was a really big popular theory back in those times. We're talking, 1816, somewhere around there, right?
Yeah, right after the Napoleonic Wars, which they could then, travel through Europe without worrying about a cannonball in their head.
Right. So then they're really exploring what the boundaries of science. And what Mary Shelley does, and this is where we could talk about some misconceptions, is she creates a creature that is 100% human in the body that's 100% monster.
Right. And think of the irony of that.
Yeah. Well, when you look at it, like I always used to, back in my day when I used to teach Sunday school, we used to talk about Jesus being 100% God and 100% man, and what that dichotomy was like. Here we have the exact opposite, 100% man and 100% monster at the same time.
And Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, and the monster's not Frankenstein. He's just called the creature, right? He's not even named. At least God named him Adam and then allowed Adam to name all the things in nature.
Right, so that's misconception number one, right? Most popular misconception. The creature is the creature. He's never named. People call him Frankenstein. If I showed you a picture, be like, that's Frankenstein. No, that's the creature.
Or Frankenstein's monster, or it should be Frankenstein's creature. Because creature and monster are two different things.
Agreed. Although they do become blended in this tale. Another misconception is that, he's the traditional Boris Karloff, doesn't speak, fire bad type Frankenstein. When in reality, this Frankenstein
is intellectual. He reads Paradise Lost. He reads all these books. And he's curious. He's well-spoken. He has pathos. He has ethos. And he cares for people. He has a few chapters in the middle of the book where he relates his story about, we can get this later with plot, but, about this family and the blind man. Now, the blind man's actually in the movie. Or it's in Young Frankenstein, I forget.
It's in a couple of them.
Yes. But
there's, by the way, 30-something movies.
Yeah, about this.
And countless plays.
But then, he really wants to come out of his hiding. And But once the family comes
You are
back,
getting into plot.
I'm getting
Go
into
ahead.
plot. I'm sorry.
Continue.
Okay. No, but then he realizes, people can't get past the looks. So love is not blind, and he rampages, and if I can't instill love, I'll instill hate.
Right.
That kind of thing.
So the other misconception we could talk about is he was in most of the movies, most of the monster movies, like Boris Karloff's, he's portrayed as a innocent. He's not innocent. He's aware of what evil acts are, and he's aware of his own humanity. The only thing that makes him a creature in the eyes of the people who see them are really his appearance, and we could talk about that in detail.
Right, because Shelley really, she has Dr. Frankenstein really describe, what he looks like, and it's like, wow.
She does, but it's surprisingly small amount.
Yeah,
like
it
if you
is.
went and looked to try to pull out all the scenes,
It's a good paragraph. But
yeah,
that's
it,
That's
right?
it.
And the fact
No
that
bolts.
the fact that that's what really drives his monsterness.
And he's just huge too.
Yeah,
He's just huge.
he's like 6 feet
And
tall.
strong. He's like the
8 feet,
Hulk.
8 feet tall. At a
He's like
time
the-
when
yeah.
the average height of man was like 5'4",
Yeah, he just has supernatural strength.
right?
Another big conception is that it was done downstairs in a laboratory, and there was Igor.
Right.
There is no guy with a hunchback. If you know Young Frankenstein, it's hilarious, because the hump keeps moving back and forth. Yes, doctor, and then pulling the monster up to the top of the tower for the lightning. That doesn't happen. He works in isolation at the top of his house, against what everyone thinks he should do.
Right.
That's another big misconception.
Right. So I mean, when it comes down to it, really, most of the misconceptions, unfortunately, are around the major theme of the book, right? Which is that this creature is actually somewhat human. It has humanity. It has an
has
essence.
more humanity than Frankenstein and
that,
anybody
you can
else.
debate that, right? Has an essence of humanity to him, and sophistication to him that makes his labeling as a monster and a creature that much more tragic.
Right.
So it's funny that those misconceptions even have propagated over the years, because really it's against the central theme of the book.
It's like reading, like thinking Jane Austen is like a romantic comedy, and it's a satire. She's satirizing these things, but it gets on film and it's like glorifying this kind of stuff, but that happens a lot. People can't like, I don't know what happens, whether it's Hollywood that gets involved, or they just want to remarket it. Little Mermaid suddenly wins Prince Eric. She doesn't turn into sea foam because you can't handle the truth.
Well, maybe. I mean, there's definitely, but that's interesting, that example, because in that they were moving away from the horror, and with Frankenstein they moved towards the horror. They made him less human and more monster. Mm-hmm. It's not like they were afraid that the audience wouldn't be able to handle the monster. Oh, and by the way, when Frankenstein, the classic Universal picture of Frankenstein, came out in the theaters, people were passing out based on the horror that they were looking at. It was totally terrifying to them to see such a sight on screen. So really, they pushed the needle the total opposite.
And what I love about Frankenstein too, unlike like zombies or like Dracula, this is a human thing that was created. So Dr. Frankenstein plays the God figure, and I am going to create life. I am going to, dabble in areas with the tree of knowledge that perhaps I shouldn't do, and he actually does it.
Right. There's definitely a sense of hubris there. And a lot of monster movies do that, though. A lot of this man's arrogance has led us to this decision, which has created our monster or our situation. Even in something like Jaws, like the mayor keeping the town open in Jaws is a moment of hubris that ultimately they paid the price.
And what happens too? I mean, hopefully, I don't know if you have any spoilers here, but him going against the scientific community and going against ethics and morals winds up, destroying so much. I mean,
He pays
many
a price
people,
for his hubris.
so many people pay a price.
Even Frankenstein himself does.
Frankenstein pays a price.
Because it becomes a sort of albatross to him that
Yeah.
he feels he must rectify, and chases the monster to the ends
Right.
of the earth, and
And he
to
wants to
his very
commit
death.
suicide sometimes. I just want to commit suicide.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
want to commit suicide.
All right, so that's our mark for this first flight. We'll come
Good.
back for a second.
All right. Cheers.